Probably no living human being in the world has affected more lives through his books in the last quarter century than the man I'm about to introduce. His 14 books have sold more than 25 million copies in 18 languages in Braille, and have influenced all elements of our society, from presidents to rock stars, from millionaires to prison convicts, from professional athletes to those men and women who are struggling so hard to free themselves from drug or alcohol addiction. He has also appeared on more than 1,200 radio and television programs around the world. He was an American Air Force officer in World War II and holds the Air Medal and with 5 oak leaf clusters, plus the Distinguished Flying Cross. Following an impressive sales career, he served as executive editor and president of Success Unlimited magazine for 15 years before retiring at the youthful age of 52 to spend all of his time writing, lecturing, and golfing. He's listed in Who's Who in America and Who's Who in the World, was the first recipient of the Napoleon Hill Gold Medal for Literary Achievement, and in 1984 became only the 14th individual inducted into the International Speakers Hall of Fame. His first book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, has become the all-time bestseller for salespeople in the entire world. And although The Greatest Salesman was published more than a quarter of a century ago, it still continues to sell more than 100,000 copies a month. That's more than 1 million copies a year, from Tokyo to Mexico to Rome. As a matter of fact, I have my personally autographed copy in Japanese, and you may read it if you like. Every generation produces a special and unique voice, a voice crying in the wilderness, a voice telling us that we already have all the tools needed to change our lives for the better, to become the persons that we were created to be, if we choose to change and to become that person. To all of you who have already been influenced by his words, and to those of you who are about to be exposed to this great man's message for the first time, I'm so very proud to introduce to you Og Mandino. Og?
Jack Boland, thank you. Thank all of you for filling this lovely room to capacity and for your loving and warm reception. I appreciate it very much. There was a cartoon in the New Yorker magazine about 2 years ago which depicted a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, dressed in a tuxedo, little shorts, big black bow tie, standing at the footlights looking out over 2 or 3 rows of this very distinguished evening gown and tuxedoed audience. And he was holding a violin in one hand and a bow in the other. And he was leaning over. And he was saying to this very distinguished crowd, "Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, I just want to remind all of you one more time that I'm only 5 years old. And I just want to remind all of you one more time that I'm just an author. And I do my very best work, I think, in a room they have set aside for me. I'm in there alone with my blue jeans and an old T-shirt, and sometimes I let the beard grow for 2 or 3 days. And I'm wrestling over this old typewriter trying to shape words into sentences and sentences into paragraphs and paragraphs into pages. And after about 2 years, more or less, hopefully I have a new book. And there's no audience watching. I don't hear any applause, no laughter, and certainly no standing ovations. And so whenever I stand up in front of a lovely crowd like this, I always feel that probably the best chance I have of letting you all go away from here with a nice impression of me is maybe if I performed a miracle up here. And you know what? I'm going to try to do that before this evening's over. I really am going to try to perform a miracle up here. Still, because of the books I've been lucky enough to write through the years, I do get invited to speak at great groups like this. And I'm amazed as I travel around the world, because speeches now are going everywhere, Lisbon and Australia and everywhere. I'm amazed. I very often get to share the platform with some of the best professional speakers in the world. And in the last year and a half or so, many of them seem to have gone on a nostalgia kick. They've reached back into the old music hall days, and they've borrowed a routine that the old baggy pants comedians used to use. And I'm sure you've seen and maybe suffered through a few of them. But anyway, when they're introduced, they don't just come walking up to the platform and say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." They come running down the aisle, or they come leaping out from backstage, and they're waving their arms, and they're kicking their feet, and by the time they get to the lectern, they're out of breath, and they grab that microphone, and they say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A funny thing happened to me tonight on the way to the auditorium." And then they tell a joke. And the joke is funny because it involves somebody in the audience that everybody knows, or maybe a local politician or a local landmark. But the joke is funny, and the audience laughs, and this lovely rapport is built up between the speaker and the audience, and the speech is a guaranteed, locked-in success. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that in the past 10 years, I probably have given about 600 speeches. From Sydney, Australia to Lisbon, from Mexico City to Guatemala City, from Vancouver to Cape Town. And nothing funny has ever happened to me on the way to any of them. Until tonight. Was walking through the lobby. Jack was just ahead of me. Young man came running up to me carrying a plastic shopping bag, tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned, and he said, "Are you Og Mandino?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Sir, do you have a minute?" And I looked at Jack, and Jack kind of nodded his head. And so we went over to this little table out there by a window. And he said, "Sir, my wife is an Og Mandino nut. She has read everything you have ever written." He said, "And she's brokenhearted today." He says, "She's a teacher. She couldn't come this afternoon, and she can't come tonight because they're having an important meeting. And what I thought I'd do is something with love." He said, "I bought one of every one of your books that's in the bookstore." And he said, "I wonder, next Thursday is her birthday. Would you autograph these books for her?" And I said, "I'd be happy to." So I took out my little pen and I proceeded to write. As I'm talking, I'm looking around to see if I can see him. "To Elizabeth with love, happy birthday, Og Mandino. To Elizabeth with love, happy birthday, Og Mandino." We did the whole, I think it was 7 books. And he puts them back in his little plastic bag and gave me a timid thank you, little hug. And he turned and started to walk away. And I forgot to keep my mouth shut. When he was about 15 feet away from me, I yelled after him, "Hey, is this going to be a surprise for Elizabeth?" And he turned with the most beautiful smile on his face, and he said, "It certainly will be, sir. She's expecting a new Toyota Celica." There's an old Japanese legend which tells us that many thousands of years ago in the central part of Japan there was a mountain with a flat top surrounded by dense jungle. And according to the legend, the mountain was called the place where you leave your parents.